Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy.
The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God.
Shame what this town has come to.
You could do something about it. You're men, ain't you?
EMP Series, Chapter 3, Revolution, Episode 23. As Carl walked along in the alley behind the buildings, he saw a light on in the kitchen of the diner. He approached slowly and peered in the window. There, working in the kitchen, prepping for breakfast, was Nick, the diner owner. Carl tried the knob on the door. It was locked. He gave 2 quick taps on the window to get Nick's attention. When Nick heard the taps, he was startled. He reached onto the table behind him and grabbed the sawed-off shotgun he kept there. He walked to the door and paused. He heard Carl's voice softly from the outside. "Nick, it's me, Carl. Let me in." Nick recognized his voice and put the shotgun down. He unlocked the door and opened it, letting Carl into the kitchen. He threw his arms around Carl and pulled him in tightly. "Brother, I'm so sorry for your loss. It was awful what they did to your boys. And Steve." Then he stopped for a second before continuing. "And Levi, too. I know him and your dad were close, bro. I'm sorry." Carl just lowered his head down without responding. Then he asked, "Nick, did you see it go down?" Nick replied, "Most of it. Joe Duncan, Levi's man, he heard the whole thing from Levi's radio. He was in the back room, taking notes. He took off right after it went down. I'm sure he's looking for you right now, bro. He can fill in any details." Carl rubbed his weary eyes. "Where's Crawford? And the man that was with him? The man that shot my sons?" "Carollo. Special Agent Rico Carollo," Nick said. "I haven't seen them yet this morning, but it's still pretty early." He glanced at his watch. 5:50 a.m. "Crawford's been coming in every morning for breakfast. Carollo's been with him almost every morning since he got here. In fact, they've been coming in right around 7 a.m., so they should be here in about an hour or so." Nick saw the wheels spinning in Carl's head. "Carl, I'm due to open in 5 minutes. By 7 a.m., this place will be pretty busy with my regular crowd. A lot of innocent people, bro." Carl, as if returning from some dark, distant place, looked over at Nick. "Yeah, well..." And then he thought about it for a moment. "Nick, I've got to get these guys alone. This might be my best and only opportunity." Nick reached out, put his hand on Carl's shoulder. "Yes, of course, brother, of course. Go wait in the office. You can see everything in there through the one-way mirror. Heck, I could put some rat poisoning in the food, and we could just watch them go down." Carl shook his head. "No, Nick. I want to make sure they know who's doing it, who's killing them. I want to look into Carollo's eyes as he takes his last breath. I just need to get them alone. I promise you, I won't let anybody else get hurt." Nick just nodded and looked Carl square in the eyes. "I'm with you, brother. Whatever you need me to do." Carl went into the office and sat at the desk, which faced out into the diner, and waited. At 6 a.m., Nick unlocked the door and flipped the sign in the window to show that he was open. Business in the diner was unusually slow that morning. In fact, activity on the platform and in the street was quiet as well. With what had happened 2 days ago, people were avoiding being in town as much as possible. At 10 minutes past 7, Captain Crawford entered the diner and sat down at his usual table. Nick brought a coffee and menu over and placed them in front of him. Crawford nodded and announced, "There's going to be 2 of us. Bring another coffee." Nick nodded and walked away. With his back to Crawford, he gave Carl a thumbs up and went to get the additional coffee. By the time he got back to the table, Rico Corolla was walking into the diner. There was only a small handful of other patrons that morning. Carl walked out from the office, came around front. He pulled a chair from an adjacent table as he approached Crawford and Corolla. He slid in front of the table they were sitting at, and before they could react, he was sitting across from them at the end of the table with his .45 out and pointed at them. "You boys slowly put your hands out on this table where I can see them. Palms down in front of me. One sudden move and I'll empty this mag into your worthless hides." Crawford complied. Crollo just sat still, staring at Carl. It was clear he was thinking about his next move. Carl said, "Reach for that gun you got in that fancy shoulder holster rig there, Mr. G-Man. Here, I'll even give you a sporting chance." Carl turned his hand 90 degrees and laid the .45 on the table in front of him, never taking his eyes off of Crollo. He snarled, "Go ahead, tough guy. Grab for the gun. Please. Nothing would make me happier than to deposit your brains on that wall behind you." Corolla sat motionless for a moment, then slowly slid his hands onto the table. Carl announced to the other patrons, "Sorry, folks, diner's closed for the rest of the day. For your own safety and well-being, I must insist you all leave immediately." As they filed out, Nick came over to the table and poured Carl a coffee. "Hungry, Carl?" he asked. Carl just shook his head. Again, never breaking his stare with Corolla. Crawford scoffed at Nick. "That's all you got to say? Ask him if he's hungry? This man is a criminal, a terrorist, and a menace. He's holding us against our will. Do something here, man." Nick smiled at Crawford. "Well, Captain, sir, truth is, I would normally come to render aid and assistance in this situation. As an upright citizen, I feel it's my duty to intervene on your behalf if I could. I'm not sure if you realize it, but I am unarmed, sir. You see, as of 2 days ago, it's illegal to carry firearms. Well, automatic firearms anyway, and that's the only kind I own. So now, I unfortunately find myself unarmed and unable to render assistance." Then he turned and looked at Carl. "Carl, you obviously did not know about the new law restricting automatic weapons. You came in here carrying an illegal firearm. There were patrons here that may have been able to stop you, except for the fact that they have chosen to adhere to the new laws." The attempt at levity was lost on Carl, who could only think of one thing at the moment: justice for Corolla and Crawford. Carl said to them, slowly, one at a time, "Lay your sidearms out on the table. Agent Corolla, you first." Then Carl raised his .45 and pointed it at Corolla's head as he complied with Carl's directive. Carl took Corolla's 9mm and released the mag lock, dropping it out onto the table. Then he pulled the slide back, ejecting the round that was in the chamber. He put the gun on the table and the mag in his coat pocket. Then he motioned to Crawford to surrender his sidearm and did the same. "Now get up and walk for the back door slowly," Carl ordered the pair. As he followed them through the kitchen toward the door, Crawford saw a weapon of opportunity. He grabbed a 10-inch cast iron skillet off the table as he passed by and turned, swinging it at Carl, who was directly behind him. Carl ducked out of the way and fired 2 shots at Crawford, hitting him in the chest with both. Crawford fell dead on the kitchen floor. During the moment of distraction, Crollo went for the hidden sidearm inside his waistband, in the small of his back, under his coat. Carl saw him just in time to deliver a kick, which forced Crollo's arm down into the side. He managed to get off a shot with the .45, which hit Carl in the thigh. As Carl fell and Crollo lifted his arm back up to fire again, a blast from a 12-gauge shotgun blew through the kitchen, hitting a rack of food storage next to the door, inches away from Crollo. Crollo barely cleared the door, entering the alley, as the second blast ripped the door jamb apart. Carl limped out into the alley in pursuit. By the time he got through the kitchen and outside, he saw a door to an adjacent store close shut behind Crollo. Carl followed, limping and bleeding. As he went through the door after him into the store, Crollo was stopped at the far end of a long hallway, facing the door, with his gun trained on it. As Carl came through, he saw Crollo as he was about to fire and dropped to the floor, firing at Crollo first. The shot hit the wall directly to Crollo's left. He fired again, hitting Crollo in the stomach, and again in the shoulder. Crollo dropped his gun and fell to the floor. As he lay there bleeding, the front door burst open and 3 soldiers entered the hallway. At the same time, Lieutenant Oliver Sanders entered the hallway through the back door from the alley. One of the soldiers at the front lifted his rifle and said, "Carl Fairley, this ends here and now." I've been waiting a long time for this moment. It was the sergeant that had his shoulder dislocated by Carl when Carl was constable, and the two argued over who was going to take possession of the rifle found in the alley that was used to carry out the first attack on the post months ago. At the other end of the hallway, Oliver Sanders drew his .45 as well. Saunders fired, killing the sergeant, who was about to shoot Carl. The other 2 soldiers looked on in amazement at what Lieutenant Saunders had just done. Then, Saunders trained the .45 on them. Men, the sergeant was right. This is going to end here and now. He was part of the corruption that has spread through this command like a malignant cancer that has rendered itself terminal. It is time for each man to decide where he stands. You are either part of the cancerous corruption, or you are earnestly and steadfastly opposed to it. I have just made my choice, and now you two must make yours. You both were there on the platform the other day when Crawford and Crollo murdered this man's sons. You have to know in your heart of hearts how wrong that was. I have been here long enough to see the truth about what is going on in this region, and both of you have been here longer than me. You must see it. Then Saunders lowered his .45 and placed it in his holster. You both are free to take whatever action you think is right. I am done watching good men kill and be killed. Then they all stood in silence for a brief moment, Carl still holding the .45 in his hand. One of the soldiers dropped his rifle into the low ready position, taking his sights off of Carl. The other soldier, when he saw the first, followed suit and dropped his rifle, letting it fall to hang from its sling. The 2 turned, one after the other, and walked out into the street. Crollo just looked up at Saunders and said, "You have no idea what you have just done. When Holmes and Mr. K find out about this, you're dead." He managed to chuckle. "You are so dead, you stupid, stupid coward." Lieutenant Saunders looked down at Carl and then over at Crollo. He turned and walked out the back door and into the alley behind. He was gone. Carl and Crollo both lay bleeding in the hall. Crollo's gun was about 15 feet away from him. Carl was still holding his. Carl struggled to his feet and walked toward Rico Carollo. As Carollo attempted to reach for his gun, Carl swept it away with his foot. He aimed his gun down at Carollo. "You're a lucky man," he told Carollo. Carollo just chuckled. Carl said, "I had different plans for you, but now I'm afraid I don't have the time to share those plans with you. But one thing has not changed. You murdered my sons, and Levi, and Steve. For that, you will die here today." Carollo chuckled yet again. "I don't think so, Mr. Fairley. Oh, don't get me wrong. I know you want to. You want to so bad it's oozing from every pore in your body. And I know how you feel. I can feel it myself. I can feel your despair and pain. I can feel your hatred for me. But you and I are more alike than I'm sure you want to admit. But we have one big difference. I can murder in cold blood. I don't enjoy it, but I'm capable of it. I've been conditioned to do it, and have murdered more men than I care to remember. But you, Mr. Fairley, you are a true warrior, a true soldier. You actually buy into all that honor before glory propaganda. I have no doubt whatsoever that you are capable of taking life, of taking my life. I know a little about you, Carl. I know you have killed and can kill again when you need to, but not like this, not cold-blooded murder. Now, I have no doubt that if I was pointing a gun at you, or if I grabbed that fire extinguisher over there and attacked you with it, that you would have no problem putting me down. Heck, you would kill me and go home and eat a nice dinner and go to bed and not lose a moment of sleep over it. But, unlike me, Carl, you are not a murderer. You would not be able to live with yourself. There would be no coming back from that place. I promise you that. Carl, standing over Carollo, lowered his gun, pointing it at the floor. You know, 3 days ago, I think that would have been true. But things are different now for me. I'm afraid that maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do. Then Carl kicked Carollo's gun over to him. He locked his eyes on Carollo's. "Go ahead, pick it up," Carl said. Carollo laughed. "I don't think so, Carl. I won't give you a reason to justify what you want so very badly to do. If you want me dead, it's going to have to be cold-blooded murder." Then Carl yelled back at him, "Pick it up. At least you'll have a chance that way. But I promise you, you die either way." Rico Carollo looked at the gun lying beside him. He looked up at Carl and saw the rage in his eyes. He saw the rage in his soul. He folded his arms and set them on his stomach. "No, Carl, I won't do that for you. I won't pick up the gun." Carl stared down at him for a moment, and then he said, "Either way," coldly, as he lifted the gun and emptied the magazine into Carollo as he lay on the ground in front of him. The end of Chapter 3, Revolution. Please stay tuned for Chapter 4, Exodus, beginning February 25th. Thanks for all your support here and on Patreon.
Whisper